Throughout the long and storied history of the Roman Empire, countless battles were fought. Some brought glory, power, and unimaginable wealth back to the city on 7 hills. Others delivered painful, humbling lessons. But among all these conflicts, one battle stands out for its sheer horror, its staggering loss of life, and the seismic shockwaves it sent through the entire Roman world. That battle was the Battle of Cannae. Imagine a scorching hot summer day in the year 16 BC, tens of thousands of Roman legions, their armor glinting under the southern Italian sun, march confidently onto a dusty, open plain. They are the pride of Rome, the backbone of its power. In their minds, this is the day they will finally crush their hated enemy, the brilliant Carthaginian general, Hannibal Barca, once and for all. This wasn't just any army. Rome had assembled one of the largest military forces in its history. These soldiers were filled with civic pride. They were brave, and they were absolutely certain of victory. For 2 long years, Hannibal had been a thorn in Rome's side, rampaging across Italy, winning victory after victory at places like Trebia and Lake Trasimene. The Roman people were scared, angry, and demanding action. So, the Senate decided to end the threat decisively. They appointed 2 consuls, Gaius Terentius Varro and Lucius Aemilius Paulus, to lead a combined force of over 80,000 men. The strategy was simple: overwhelm Hannibal with sheer numbers. The Romans believed in a direct, brute force approach. They would pack their legions into a deep, dense formation and smash through the center of Hannibal's smaller army. It was a classic Roman tactic that had worked 1,000 times before. Why would today be any different? On the other side of the field stood Hannibal's army, a motley crew of about 50,000 soldiers from Carthage, Spain, and Gaul. They were outnumbered, far from home and facing the mightiest military machine of the ancient world. But they had one thing the Romans didn't. Hannibal, he was a master of strategy, a student of his enemy's psychology. He knew the Romans were arrogant, aggressive, and predictable, and he had a plan, a brilliant, terrifying plan that would turn Rome's greatest strength into its fatal weakness. As the battle began, the Roman legions charged forward exactly as Hannibal had predicted. They crashed into the center of the Carthaginian line, which was deliberately made thin and weak with his less reliable Gallic and Spanish infantry. The center began to buckle, to retreat. The Romans roared in triumph. Sensing victory, they pushed deeper and deeper, convinced they were breaking the enemy line. But it wasn't a retreat. It was a trap. While the Romans were focused on the collapsing center, Hannibal's elite African infantry, positioned on the wings of his army, held firm. As the Roman mass surged forward, these veteran troops began to swing inwards, like 2 giant doors closing. At the same time, Hannibal's superior cavalry, having already routed the Roman horsemen on the flanks, swept around to attack the Roman legions from behind. Suddenly, the triumphant Roman army found itself completely surrounded. The trap had sprung. What happened next was not a battle. It was a slaughter. The vast Roman army, packed so tightly together they could barely lift their swords, became a helpless mass of humanity. Panic set in. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The Carthaginians pressed in from all sides, cutting them down hour after hour under the relentless sun. By the end of the day, the dusty plain of Cannae was soaked in blood. Historians estimate that between 50,000 and 70,000 Roman soldiers were killed. One of the consuls, Lucius Aemilius Paulus, died fighting alongside his men. It was the single worst defeat in Roman history. The news of Cannae struck Rome like a thunderbolt. The city fell into a state of panic and despair. An entire generation of its young men had been wiped out in a single afternoon. Doors were barred, streets were empty, and the sounds of wailing could be heard from every house. Many thought the end of Rome was at hand, that Hannibal would march on the city itself. But he didn't. Why he hesitated remains one of history's great debates. Instead of breaking Rome, the catastrophe at Cannae forged its resolve. The Romans refused to surrender. They mourned their dead, but they also learned from their mistakes. They abandoned their reckless aggression and adopted a new strategy of delay and harassment, a war of attrition that eventually wore Hannibal down. Cannae was a horrific lesson, paid for in blood, but it was a lesson that ultimately helped shape Rome into the resilient, dominant power that would rule the known world for centuries to come. It taught them that brute force isn't always enough, and that true strength lies in the ability to endure, adapt, and overcome even. To truly understand the Battle of Cannae, we have to rewind and look at the epic rivalry that set the stage for one of history's greatest military showdowns. Imagine the Mediterranean world, more than 2,000 years ago. Two superpowers are on a collision course, Rome and Carthage. On one side, you have the Roman Republic. Think of them as the rising stars, disciplined, organized, and relentlessly expanding their control across the Italian peninsula. Their legions were becoming legendary, a symbol of military might and engineering genius. They had this unshakable belief in their destiny to rule. On the other side, there's Carthage. This wasn't just any city. It was the heart of a massive maritime empire. Located in modern-day Tunisia, Carthage was a trading powerhouse. Their ships dominated the seas, connecting a network of wealthy ports and colonies across North Africa, Spain, and the islands of the Mediterranean. They controlled vital trade routes, which meant they controlled immense wealth. Gold, silver, tin, you name it. It probably passed through a Carthaginian port. Their strength was built on commerce and a powerful navy. So, you have these two giants, both ambitious, both powerful, and both wanting the same thing: complete dominance over the Mediterranean. It's like having two heavyweight champions in the same ring, and there's only room for one. Rome wanted to expand its territory and secure its borders. Carthage wanted to protect its lucrative trade network and keep its rivals in check. A clash was inevitable. This intense competition wasn't just a brief spat. It ignited a series of devastating conflicts known as the Punic Wars. The name Punic comes from the Roman word for the Carthaginians, Punicus, referencing their Phoenician origins. These weren't small-scale skirmishes. We're talking about three massive, prolonged wars spanning over a century. They were brutal, fought on land and sea, involving hundreds of thousands of soldiers and sailors. The First Punic War was largely a naval conflict, as Rome, a traditional land power, had to rapidly build a fleet from scratch to challenge Carthage's mastery of the sea. Rome eventually won, gaining control of Sicily and forcing Carthage to pay a hefty price. But this defeat didn't break Carthage. Instead, it planted the seeds of a deep-seated desire for revenge. And that's where the story of Cannae really begins. Humiliated and hungry for payback, Carthage found its champion in a man whose name would echo through history: Hannibal Barca. His father, a general in the First War, allegedly made him swear an oath of eternal hatred toward Rome. Hannibal took that oath to heart. He expanded Carthaginian influence in Spain, building up a formidable army and preparing for the moment he could strike back at the heart of his enemy. The Second Punic War, the War of Hannibal, was about to begin. It wouldn't be fought just for territory or trade routes. For Hannibal, this was personal. He wasn't just going to fight Rome. He was going to bring the war to their doorstep, marching his army, complete with war elephants, on an audacious and legendary journey over the Alps and into Italy itself. This set the stage for a campaign that would terrorize Rome for years. The Romans, confident on their home turf, were about to face a military genius unlike any they had ever encountered. Every battle was a step closer to the ultimate confrontation, a day that would become infamous in the annals of military history. This collision of empires, fueled by ambition, greed, and a thirst for revenge, created the perfect... Hey everyone, and welcome back to our channel. Today, we are rediving deep into the mind of one of history's greatest military commanders, Hannibal Barca. When you hear the name Hannibal, you probably picture elephants crossing the Alps, a bold and almost mythical image. But that incredible feat was just one part of his genius. Hannibal was far more than just a brave warrior. He was a true master of strategy, psychology, and timing. He didn't just fight battles, he orchestrated them. So, what made him so effective? First, Hannibal had a profound understanding of human behavior. He knew that fear is a powerful weapon, perhaps even more potent than a sword or spear. He understood how to exploit the anxieties of his enemies, making them second-guess their decisions and fall into his carefully laid traps. Think about the Battle of Lake Trasimene. Hannibal didn't just charge at the Roman army. He used the morning fog and the terrain to his advantage, setting up a massive ambush that the Romans walked right into. They were caught completely by surprise, trapped between the lake and Hannibal's hidden forces. It was a masterclass in psychological warfare. He also knew how overconfidence can blind even the strongest armies. The Roman Republic was the superpower of its day, proud and often arrogant. Hannibal used this to his advantage time and time again. He would feign weakness, lure Roman commanders into thinking they had the upper hand, and then spring his trap. The Battle of Cannae is the ultimate example of this. Facing a much larger Roman force, Hannibal designed a strategy that looked like a retreat. His center line fell back, drawing the eager Romans deeper and deeper into a U-shaped formation. The Romans, smelling victory, pushed forward relentlessly. But it was all a part of Hannibal's plan. Once they were fully enveloped, Hannibal's elite cavalry, which he had positioned on the wings, crashed into their rear. The Romans were surrounded and annihilated. It remains one of the most studied and devastating tactical victories in military history. What's even more incredible is the army he commanded. It wasn't a unified national force. Hannibal's army was a true melting pot of cultures and fighting styles. He commanded Africans, Spaniards, Gauls, and mercenaries from all over the Mediterranean. Each group brought its own unique strengths to the table. The Numidian cavalry were legendary light horsemen, perfect for scouting and harassment. The Spanish infantry were steadfast and skilled with their swords. The Gauls were fierce warriors, known for their terrifying charges. Many commanders would have struggled to manage such a diverse group, with all their different languages and customs. But not Hannibal. He turned this diversity into a formidable advantage. He knew exactly how to position each unit to maximize its effectiveness. He didn't just throw them into battle. He created a symphony of destruction where every instrument played its part perfectly. How did he maintain control? Through discipline, training, and trust. He trained his men to move with incredible speed and precision. His marches were legendary, often covering vast distances in unbelievable time, catching his enemies completely off guard. He instilled a deep sense of discipline in his ranks. But most importantly, his soldiers trusted him implicitly. They believed in his leadership because he consistently delivered results. He shared their hardships, lived among them, and understood them. This bond was the glue that held his multinational army together, allowing them to fight as one cohesive and deadly unit for over a decade on enemy soil. His cavalry, in particular, deserves a special mention. Hannibal understood the power of mobile warfare long before it became a staple of modern armies. His cavalry was exceptionally well trained, fast, and devastatingly effective. At battles like Cannae and the Trebia River, it was his cavalry that delivered the decisive blow, outmaneuvering the Roman horsemen and then slamming into the infantry's vulnerable flanks and rear. This tactical flexibility, the ability to strike where the enemy was weakest, was a hallmark of his command. He didn't just win battles. He changed how they were fought. So, when we look back at Hannibal, we see more than just a general. We see a brilliant strategist, a keen psychologist, and a charismatic leader who forged a legendary army from a patchwork of different peoples. His legacy isn't just about crossing the Alps with elephants. It's about his innovative tactics and his deep understanding of the art of war. His strategies are still studied today in military academies around the world. Welcome back to Epic Histories. Today, we re-dive into one of the most brilliant military victories of all time. The Battle of Cannae. Picture this. It's 216 BC. The Roman Republic is the superpower of the Mediterranean, but a Carthaginian general named Hannibal Barca has been running circles around them on their own turf for 2 years. He's crossed the Alps with elephants, won major battles at Trebia and Lake Trasimene, and is now deep in southern Italy. The Romans, furious and embarrassed, have had enough. They decide to raise the largest army they've ever put into the field, a colossal force of nearly 80,000 men. Their mission: find Hannibal and crush him once and for all. The stage is set near a small village called Cannae. It's the height of a scorching Italian summer. The land is flat, dusty, and wide open, perfect for the massive Roman legions to deploy their strength. The Aufidus River snakes nearby, a critical source of water in the oppressive heat. As tens of thousands of soldiers march into position, the air thickens with dust and anticipation. You can almost hear the clank of armor, the thunder of hooves, and the nervous murmur of men about to face death. The Roman consuls, Varro and Paulus, are in command. Varro, eager for a decisive victory, convinces his more cautious colleague to engage. They are confident. They have nearly double Hannibal's numbers. How could they possibly lose? This is where Hannibal's genius truly shines. He knows he can't win a straight-up fight against the Roman meat grinder. He has to outthink them, to turn their strength into a weakness. As the sun rises on that fateful day, Augustus in a day Hannibal arranges his army in a way that seems completely insane. He takes his weakest troops, his Gallic and Spanish infantry, and places them right in the center, pushing them forward in a crescent shape that bulges towards the Romans. It looks like an invitation to attack, a weak spot begging to be broken. On the flanks, he positions his elite African infantry, his battle-hardened veterans, and on the far wings, he places his superior cavalry, the Numidians, and the Spanish Gallic horsemen. It's a trap, but the Romans don't see it yet. The Romans, seeing the weak center, do exactly what Hannibal expects. They pack their legions into a deep, dense formation designed to punch straight through the Carthaginian line and shatter it. They plan to overwhelm the enemy with sheer mass and pressure. As the trumpets blare, the Roman legions surge forward. The ground trembles as 80,000 men advance. They crash into Hannibal's thin central line of Gauls and Spaniards. The clash of steel is deafening. At first, it seems to be working for the Romans. They push the crescent back, deeper and deeper. The Carthaginian center gives way, bending under the immense pressure. Roman soldiers cheer, sensing victory is near. They pour into the gap, pressing their advantage. But this is precisely what Hannibal wanted. The bulging crescent wasn't a mistake. It was a carefully designed funnel. As the Romans push forward, the Carthaginian line bends, but it doesn't break. It slowly inverts, from a convex crescent to a concave one. The Roman legions, so focused on the crumbling center, are now being drawn into a pocket. They are so tightly packed that many soldiers can't even lift their arms to swing their swords. They've become a disorganized, compressed mob. While this is happening, the real action begins on the flanks. On T-wings, Hannibal's cavalry smashes into the much weaker Roman horsemen. On one side, his heavy cavalry, led by his brother Hasdrubal, shatters the Roman cavalry and sends them fleeing from the field. Instead of chasing them, they execute a brilliant maneuver. They wheel around the back of the entire Roman army to strike the remaining Roman cavalry on the other wing from behind. The Roman horse is completely routed. Now, the Roman infantry is alone, with no cavalry protection. They are still pushing into the center, completely unaware of the disaster unfolding around them. This is the moment the jaws of the trap snap shut. The elite African infantry, which Hannibal had held in reserve on the flanks, now turn inwards. They attack the exposed sides of the Roman legions. Suddenly, the Romans are being hit from the front, from the left, and from the right. Then, Hannibal's victorious cavalry completes its circle and slams into the Roman rear. The encirclement is complete. The mighty Roman army, the largest they had ever fielded, is now trapped in a circle of death. There is no escape. What followed was not a battle, but a slaughter. The Roman soldiers, packed shoulder to shoulder, were à ples. They were attacked from all four sides. The outer ranks fell, and the circle tightened. The summer sun beat down as the dust turned to a red mist. 4 hours. Hannibal's men systematically cut down the trapped Romans. There was no room to maneuver, no way to form a defense, no path to retreat. The Roman consul Paulus was killed in the fighting, along with 80 Roman senators who were serving as officers. By the end of the day, the field of Cannae was a scene of unimaginable carnage. Estimates vary, but sources claim that 50 to 70,000 Roman soldiers were killed. Hannibal lost only around 6,000 men. It was a tactical masterpiece, a perfect double envelopment that is still studied in military academies around the world today. Hannibal had used his smaller, more diverse army to completely annihilate a force nearly twice its size. He had exploited the Romans' own aggressive tactics and turned their greatest strength, their massive infantry numbers, into their fatal flaw. In the aftermath, Rome was in a state of pure panic. They had lost the flower of their youth, a huge portion of their ruling class, and their military prestige was in tatters. Many of Rome's allies in Italy defected to Hannibal's side. It seemed like the city itself was on the verge of capture. Hannibal's cavalry commander, Hannibal, famously told him, "You know how to win a victory. Hannibal, you do not know how to use one." He urged Hannibal to march on Rome immediately, but Hannibal hesitated. Whether it was due to a lack of siege equipment, an exhausted army, or a strategic miscalculation, he chose not to. That decision may have saved Rome. The Romans, despite their catastrophic loss, refused to surrender. They displayed incredible resilience, levying new legions, even recruiting slaves and boys. The Fabian strategy of avoiding direct battle and harassing Hannibal's supply lines was real. While Hannibal had won the battle of a lifetime, he would ultimately lose the war. Rome would recover, take the fight to Carthage in Africa, and eventually force Hannibal to return home to defend his own city, where he would be defeated at the Battle of Zama. The Battle of Cannae remains Hannibal's greatest triumph, and a chilling lesson in military history. It shows that numbers aren't everything. Strategy, leadership, and the ability to understand and exploit an opponent's psychology can lead to victories against impossible odds. It's a story of genius, of brutality, and of a single day that nearly brought the Roman Republic to its knees. What an incredible piece of history. Welcome back to our channel, where we dive deep into the most epic moments in history. Today, we're stepping onto the dusty plains of Cannae, a place where military genius would be written in blood and steel. The year is 216 BC. Two titans are about to collide. The unstoppable Roman Republic and the brilliant Carthaginian general, Hannibal Barca. Imagine the tension in the air, thick enough to taste. Tens of thousands of men, their hearts pounding in their chests, staring across a field that would soon become their glory or their grave. The signal is given. A deafening blast of horns cuts through the morning quiet, followed by the roar of over 100,000 soldiers. This is it. The Roman legions, a juggernaut of infantry, begin their advance. Their strategy's classic. Roman brute force punch a hole straight through the enemy's center and shatter their army in two. From the Roman perspective, everything is going exactly to plan. Their heavy infantry crashes into Hannibal's front line, a mix of Spanish and Gallic warriors. The impact is like a tidal wave of metal and muscle. Shields splinter, swords clash, and the first men fall. The Romans are relentless, a disciplined machine of war, and tepus. Slowly, almost reluctantly, Hannibal's center begins to give way. The Gauls and Iberians are tough fighters, but they're no match for the sheer weight and pressure of the Roman legions. The Roman commanders, watching from the rear, must have felt a surge of confidence. They see the enemy line bending, buckling under their assault. This is what Roman power looks like. They shout orders to press the advantage, to drive the enemy into a full-blown rout. The legionaries respond with a fresh surge of aggression, their disciplined ranks surging forward, deeper and deeper into the Carthaginian formation. They smell victory. They believe they are just moments away from breaking Hannibal's army and ending this war. But what the Romans perceive as a retreat is actually a masterfully orchestrated trap. Hannibal is not being defeated. He's luring them in. This backward movement was his plan all along. As the massive Roman army advances, a fatal change begins to happen to their own formation. The further they push into the crescent-shaped line, the more their own flanks get squeezed. The wide, powerful Roman front starts to narrow, becoming a dense, compressed mass of butter. Soldiers who started the charge with space to fight now find themselves shoulder to shoulder, elbow-willed, with their comrades. The dust kicked up by thousands of marching feet mixes with sweat, choking the air and stinging their eyes. Communication breaks down. The roar of battle, the cries of the wounded, and the sheer press of humanity makes it impossible for orders to be heard. The Roman legionary, one of the most effective soldiers in the ancient world, is suddenly rendered impotent. His greatest weapon, the gladius, needs room to be used effectively. He no longer has. The very success of their initial charge has become their undoing. They've pushed so far forward that they've essentially walked into a cage of their own making, a packed, disorganized crowd. They are blind, they are deafened, and they are hopelessly congested. And all the while, on the edges of this chaos, something terrible is beginning to unfold. Hannibal's elite African infantry, held in reserve on the flanks, has not moved an inch. They have been watching, waiting, as the Romans willingly march into the killing zone. The jaws of the trap are now perfectly positioned. All they need is the signal to close. The greatest slaughter in Roman history is about to begin. Thank you for watching, and be sure to subscribe for more dives into the pivotal battles that shaped our world.